welcome to this video. In this video we will emphasize on and illustrate the Younger Dryas Ice Age and Younger Dryas boundary with certain impacts or proxies for meteorite impact or nuclear explosion were deliberately caused by our direct ancestors, mainly through destruction of biodiversity, soil and climate. So biodiversity destruction, soil destruction and climate destruction by our direct ancestors, which are hybrid amarants of the haplogroup R and its descendants. This was point 1 that we will emphasize on and illustrate. Now point 2 and 3. Western Eurasians, dominated by haplogroup R, come from the Americas. Third, Western Europeans, dominated by R1b, which is a subhaplogroup or a further hybridization of R and R1, comes from North America, propelled by the North Atlantic gyre with boats taking advantage of the North Atlantic gyre. Western Eurasians, which are not necessarily all R1b, have several routes. One of the routes is also the North Atlantic gyre with boats. Arguments that we have to know our genome better. At this point we still neglect from where the genome came, or where we came from, and how it came to be the genome, which this neglection hinders us to understand better our genome that we totally depend on logically. Some of the cultures that were turned over and went extinct is the Clovis cultures in the Americas itself. Clovis cultures, there are Clovis cultures or Clovis-like cultures in South America. In fact, they are the ancestors of these Clovis cultures. So they went extinct. So the extinction results in a black mat, and then below that black mat you have the tools of the Clovis culture, and you have the megafauna, and above that black mat that is supposed to characterize the Younger Dryas impact 12,800 years ago. You don't find these tools anymore, so the Clovis cultures, hunter-gatherers, like we call them, are extinct, and the megafauna is extinct as well. They are extinct by our direct ancestors that destroyed biodiversity, soil and climate, so that these cultures and the megafauna went extinct. And this is the supposed Younger Dryas boundary field, which is supposed to be a result from a meteorite impact, but in fact it's the result of the destruction. It's a part of destruction of our direct ancestors, which have their root here, haplogroup R1b. with the North Atlantic Gyre come to Western Europe and Western Eurasia. They also come to uh, the rest of Asia, of Eurasia. This is an illustration of these R1 that came from the Americas through several routes. This is the one that came through the more Arctic routes and other routes that I cannot show here because the map is not complete. So now I will show the ones that occupied the steppes, invaded the steppes, Kazakhstan as well, steppes, and so this is the more Western Eurasian version, and this is the more this is the Eastern Eurasian version of the invaders, and this is the more Western Eurasian version of the invaders. This is an illustration of the Sintashta, here just above Kazakhstan, up river, Yenisei river, Nova Zembla. So these are two versions. This is the version closer to us, where we also come from, but Western Europeans, especially from the facade, mainly come from here. But in fact, it's all the same. This is one of the places we come from, the cradle root of haplogroup R1. So no more in detail. In this video we will emphasis on and illustrate the Younger Dryas ice age and boundary impacts, proxies of meteorite impacts and nuclear explosions were deliberately caused by our direct ancestors, which are hybrid Amarins R1 from North America, mainly through destruction of biodiversity, soil and climate. So this is where they come from, the root in North America. This is an older route where they more turn over Western Eurasia. This is the route that I couldn't show you in the former figure. This is Southeast Asia and East Asia and South Asia, and this is the most used route, especially for Western Europe and the Atlantic facade of Europe or Western Eurasia. As said, this is the cultures, as cultures, as the impact they left. So they arrive as mature cultures that are masters in metallurgy and domestication. There's use of metal here and in the horse equipment as well. This is a turnover visualized. This is what was before the turnover. The turnover is red, R1b. This is the turnover, that's after 4400, and this is before the turnover. So these are the peoples that are eliminated, and these are the ones that took over, replaced, turned over, the blue dots, and This R1B M269 is where at least Western Europeans and the same way all Western Eurasians come from. This is the impact of this particular invasion. This is the R today, so Western Eurasia. And the same thing happened, but through other routes in Eastern Eurasia, and after all also in Africa. How the culture operated, what shows that they are advanced, technological, mythology. How the cultures operated later, closer to the Bronze Age, because these cultures are 4,000 or more years ago. This is around the Bronze Age collapse, 3100 BP. And this is part of the preparations and logistics, in this case in Sardinia, before the Bronze Age collapse. So they had to depart from a basis, Sardinia being one of the bases they departed from. This is one of the archaeological rests of one of such bases, but it's quite impressive. They have towers, these fortresses. This is a smaller one. They have towers up to 30 meters. This is R1, that is in the Americas, and this is R1A, Eastern Eurasia and Eastern Europe, and this is R1B, Western Eurasia and Western Europe. This is what was before R. Q was already arriving, but through other routes, Arctic routes or North Pacific routes and South Pacific routes. These are the routes. This is the North Atlantic gyre, and this is the gyres that leave from the Americas to Australia, Sahul Land, Southeast Asia, East Asia. This is the Arctic route. This is discussed in other videos. Why they choose a certain pot, most probably the pot of the megafauna. This shows that we indeed have Native American amarant DNA. This is a video of David Reich, Ancient DNA and the New Science of the Human Past, March 2021. This is the Younger Dryas, caused by the destruction of our direct ancestors. This is a nuclear test in the United States in a location called Trinite, and that's why these results from the nuclear explosion is called Trinitite 1945. So this is similar to what is found in the black mat from the Younger Dryas, when the megafauna was extinct, when cultures like Clovis culture all over the world, that means hunter-gatherers, were extinct, and so their fossils of the megafauna and of these hunter-gatherers can only found below the black mat, their fossils and their tools. After The black mat is the Bronze Age, and if something is found, it's bronze tools and, well, objects, like chariots, for instance. These invaders or direct ancestors were not dependent on megafauna. They presented more lactose tolerance and at the same time a relative dependence on lactose and carbohydrates for their brains that now have to work on metabolism, now has to work without the fat digesting gene typical for the amarants until today, which proves that the amarants are not or less hybridized. All these subjects are discussed in other videos. This is the other boundary where destruction took place when out of Americas turned over and populated well, the other part of the world, so to speak, including Africa. Haplogroup E, haplogroup D, and here haplogroup R, which is later than D and O and E in Africa. You can ask the question, why did the meteorite did not hit Africa, which is in the center of the all-time boundaries, in the center of this boundary and this boundary. Western Eurasians come from the Americas. I said before, Western Eurasians come from the Americas. Western Europeans come from North America, propelled by the North Atlantic Gyre. Propelled by the North Atlantic Gyre. So I claim that we have to know our genome better. At this point we still neglect our genome and where it came from and how it came to be, and in the places where we are today as modern humans. The modern humans, Western Eurasia, which are the latest, present recessive genes and traits that are, as such, are clear signals of recent hybridization. The pattern that I explained, which is focused on Western Eurasia and Western Europe and even on the Atlantic facade of Western Eurasia, the pattern is similar for the rest of the world. After all come from the Americas quite recently and are hybrids too. We know what destroyed our direct ancestors and what was destroyed: biodiversity, climate and soils. So we also know what can be repaired and must be repaired, for instance to control or reverse climate change. But such a repair was never applied, and what was destroyed was never repaired, and neither destruction nor the need for repair are recognized. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye.